There's no funny quip this time.
So over the course of this podcast, we made some allusions to the fact that I'm pursuing an education. I'm not as conventional as like somebody like Spencer here who just did the right thing right out the gate. I'd say I'm an older fella going back and taking classes just because I'm surrounded by a bunch of like children.
Yeah.
And so I feel kind of weird about it, but that's my own hang up when I'm really not like that different from them. I've just
a couple years older.
I've obstructed that. I put that barrier up myself.
Yeah.
So as not to be
your anti-normie barrier. I understand.
To not be the weird like old guy like trying to be like too friendly with a bunch of people.
With a bunch of 19-year-old college students.
Because I've got too much self-awareness sometimes. And that's something that we kind of wanted to talk about today is this idea of self-awareness. And not so much just that, but like psychology stuff, Spencer. So that's what I'm going for. And I've taken a couple of classes. I'm still pretty low level. Like technically, I would be considered a freshman. I had a couple of courses under my belt, and then I took a couple over the last couple of years when I was working at the college, and I got like free credits. But now I'm full time, and I've taken a few psych classes. I think a total of 3 now.
Yeah.
I should know that.
Perfectly good enough to express your psych opinions to Magic players.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm pretty much an expert at this point.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I learned about last semester in my cultural psychology class was the idea of what's called a locus of control. And that's to mean it's refers to an individual's perception about the underlying causes of why things happen in their life. And it's kind of like, do you believe your destiny is controlled by yourself or by external forces like fate or God or other people, whatever. Yeah, it's do you believe like I have control about everything? Can I control my own fate and everything, or is it the result of external forces acting upon me?
Another way to describe that would be, does life happen to me, or do I happen to life? Maybe.
I like that, yeah. So it's broken up into what is either an internal locus of control, which is the I have control, or the external, which is other things have control over me and my actions and what things happen to me. Mm-hmm. And so, what does a locus mean? Because that's a word that I don't think a lot of people use. Like Magic players would be like, oh, it's like Omnath. It's like, well, okay, yeah, kind of. Because so I looked this up. The very basic definition is it's just a particular position, point, or place in something.
When I hear locus, I think of like Eastern like meditation and stuff like that. Because I think They use that word sometimes.
Oh yeah, because a locus it's just mainly like the locus of control thing. It mostly means where is it that you place your sense of control, like within yourself. Mm-hmm. Is it within you, or is it external? Is it something?
What's the place that you put it? Yeah.
Where is the control?
Yeah,
and
if you had to visualize some place the control originates, where would that be?
Yeah, so an example. So I want to talk about like things about people with an internal or an external locus of control. So we have found this really helpful little like 2-page like PDF article thing that was a really nice write-up about it. Maybe we'll link it in the show notes or something. But it said, for describing people with an internal locus of control, that they can be psychologically unhealthy and unstable. An internal orientation usually needs to be matched by competence, self-efficacy, and opportunity so that person is able to successfully experience the sense of personal control and responsibility. Overly internal people who lack competence, efficacy, and opportunity can become neurotic, anxious, and depressed. In other words, internals need to have a realistic sense of their circle of influence in order to experience success. And for external people, it simply says they can lead easygoing, relaxed, happy lives.
That's pretty based. So it's to paraphrase, I suppose, what I get out of that, Eli, when I hear it, and you can tell me if I'm hearing that correctly, is that if you have this internal sense of control, thinking that like you are pretty much like in control of your life. You have to be measured and realistic in how you approach things. Otherwise, you could just slip into a cycle of thinking that you're not good enough or inadequacy or stuff like that.
Well, yeah, really, if you have that belief about your locus of control being internal, if that's how you see things, and you also think like I kind of struggle with this sometimes. If you're like, wow, I'm just the dumbest person alive. Like we talked about in the last podcast, how I took that test that proved that I'm brain stupid.
If you think that if you are a person with an internal locus of control, then every flaw with yourself should then be your fault,
yeah.
Right? And you have to have some level of emotional maturity, or like it says in here, self-efficacy and opportunity. Be realistic.
Yeah, so I'm at a really weird place with my locus of control, because I'll usually, if something goes wrong or I do something bad, I'll try and take responsibility for it, like when appropriate. Mm-hmm. But if something goes really good, like I've had a couple of financial windfalls over the last couple of years of like going back to college, like they'll sometimes kick you back some money or something, like if you got too much, and I'll be like, wow, that was really like awesome, like that was complete luck, like, or like winning certain Commander games or something. I'll be like, well, I just got really lucky that game. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I'll attribute success to external forces, but failures to internal forces.
Yep.
And that is it's not fun.
And that is to say, that's a good point, because I think we can definitely experience both internal and external locus of controls in different aspects of our life. So, for example, like you were saying earlier, Eli, someone might have an internal locus of control, meaning that they are in control of their actions, they're in control of what happens to them, but they might also blame outside forces in so far as playing Commander, right, or something else in their life. So you might have different perspectives in different aspects of life.
I think it's very fluid. Like, I don't think anybody, or most people probably aren't 100% like internal or
like
external.
A spectrum.
Yeah, and it's kind of how people form that belief is oftentimes a result of their culture. Mm-hmm. And so, like I was saying, I took this cultural psychology class, and one of the underlying principles of that class was explaining the difference between individualistic cultures and collectivist cultures. So a collectivist culture would be a culture that prioritizes solidarity and like group work over individual goals, while an individualistic culture focuses on human independence and your sense of freedom and individuality.
Collectivist, a collectivist might do something for the good of society, whereas an individualist do something for the good of themselves.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few kind of thing. And then individualistic culture is kind of just it's like the United States,
Yeah, it's like we home of the land of the free, home of the brave.
Yeah, we need our freedom.
Yeah, Giga Chat.
Kind of the up yours, got mine. And that's not a bad thing. I think there's actually a lot of pros and cons to both of them, and they can definitely complement each other in some nice. And there's stuff to be learned from each culture.
Yeah,
like the class really mostly outlined it in a sense of most Western cultures are fairly individualistic, and then more Eastern cultures, like specifically the one that got referenced a lot was Japan as being a very collectivistic culture.
Yeah,
and that's not to say that it's 100% like black and white that way.
Yeah, but just as a general observation, I suppose. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And I think what you were trying to get at, Eli, with this kind of individualistic culture versus collectivist culture, is that
so how this ties to the locus of control is typically people within an individualistic culture, they have an internal locus of control. They think that things are caused by their own actions, and they have responsibility over the things that happen in their lives. They like to take
agency.
Yeah, and like when good things happen, you'll say like that was me.
You'll take
like,
comfort in that because it was it was earned.
Yeah, you feel like you have control over everything that happens.
Sure.
Whereas in a collectivistic culture, you're more likely to think things are external forces. You have the external locus of control.
Things are given to you or taken away from you by other outside forces.
Yeah, and sometimes that definitely helps, I think, to get by in life. It's people don't like to internalize things, and
it can be kind of a coping mechanism, maybe.
Yeah, and especially if you are in a very supportive environment where you have a lot of things done for you by other people, and that's not necessarily always the case, or if you're the person doing things for other people, you kind of see it as more of like a group effort than an individual, like, internal thing.
And this isn't to say that either of them is inherently better than the other, of course. Like, it's just different. Yeah. And there's things you can realize about each thing. But like you were saying, Eli, it can be very comforting to know that, like, a community is caring for you or something, right?
Yeah, so the main idea of this episode is we have this idea and this thought from our personal experience, and this is definitely not 100% the case because everybody's different, but I feel like Magic players, especially Commander players, tend to have more of an external locus of control.
A collectivist culture, if you will.
Yeah, and that's weird because you would think, well, we're in the United States here. This is a Western, very individualistic culture. So why is it that we feel, and like I said, this might not be the case. If you want to, like, leave a comment and, like, staunchly disagree with this, that's fine. But I feel like the Magic community is kind of a collectivistic culture. It's kind of about, people always say it gets a little bit old, but they don't stop saying it. It's not about the magic, it's about the gathering.
You know, a lot of people in Commander especially, you try to optimize for the table, like the fun, like stuff like Rule Zero conversations, because you're trying to have a good time with everybody, right? Like you make plays, I mean, not, I shouldn't say you, but I mean, like, one might make plays in Commander, myself included, that, you know, to not be too mean or whatever, because people won't have a great time, and maybe that's because of some individualistic nature, like you want to play more Commander. But I think generally it is because you care about their feelings and stuff like that, right?
Even like you were saying there, like, I think, are both of the opinion you want to have that behavior and you want to act like that and make people have a good time because it's a net benefit to you. Like, it still is kind of like you're doing an altruistic thing for selfish
yourself,
reasons.
Yeah.
But that is still kind of, in a way, forcing you into the collectivist culture.
Yeah, you're kind of forcing you to conform to the collectivist kind of thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, and you have to fit within that sort of framework. Otherwise, it falls apart. Like, you can't go to the game shop, like, as a Commander player, like, every week and just be a complete dickhole to everybody.
You're not going to have a good time.
Even if you hate their guts. Like, if you want to play Magic, you show up there. Where I feel like, maybe this is specifically to Commander, Spencer, because I feel like I've played against people in, like, pre-releases or standard events and stuff, and you sit down and play with them, and they are just not having it for the social interaction. You get the idea they showed up just to play Magic, and they showed up to win.
Yeah.
They're, like, not looking for the human connection so much. Mm-hmm. They're just using you as, like, a game piece, almost.
Well, in formats like that, like the pre-release stuff like that, like games are paired for you. Like, you don't have to go and search out a game. Like, you're entering a tournament and, like, being paired up against someone, whereas in Commander, almost most of the time, it's you're choosing to play against somebody. Like, you know, you're like, oh, let's get together and play a game. Like, people can't really just say no in, like, a pre-release, like, event. Like, I mean, they could, but that means they lose, right?
You should do that more often.
Oh, if there's somebody you don't want to play with,
somebody, no.
Sorry, I'm not playing against you.
I defy you. I won't be a part of the system.
But I think what you were saying earlier, Eli, that might want to touch on more before we go in directly, is that we talked a lot about the collectivist thing there, but also, like you were saying, kind of an external locus of control can be associated with blaming things in a Commander game on outside factors as opposed to blaming them on yourself, right? Like, looking at what you can do versus looking at what, you know, is uncontrollable.
Right, especially in Commander, it's a format designed in such a way that you're supposed to lose most of your games.
And it's also designed around variance.
Right, and I think that's hard for a lot of people to parse because we generally, as human beings, like, there's a lot of the things we do, like, psychologically, are because we need to keep a certain image of ourselves as, like, how, like, we have certain beliefs about what kind of person we are.
A self-image.
And we need to think certain things to keep that image up. Otherwise, you become, like, a lot of people who have depression or anxiety. It's because they have a problem with that, like maintaining a healthy self-image.
It's very hard to live thinking a lot of negative things about yourself. So generally, we, as humans, try to, live in a way where we don't have very negative self-images of ourselves.
Yeah,
we don't think that we're the worst person in the world, ideally.
Well, really, I think for anyone to be happy, to quote, like, what is it to be happy, is mostly you just need to, you need to believe that you're kind of the hero of your own story. If you don't, like, I mean, I think that what's the thing, a lot of people say some people have, like, real, like, main character syndrome.
Yeah, sure.
Where they just think, like,
Everything's
they don't think about anyone, like, outside of them, and
yeah,
they lack a little bit of empathy or tact, but...
No, but, yeah, so why don't we, we're going to start talking about ways in Commander that things that you can control and things that you can't control, because I think some of these things might be taken for granted because of, like we were saying, that external locus of control. It might be intuitive to a lot of people to think that when something happens in a game, it was because that's just how the other players play it, or just was because of what happens. But I think maybe we can introduce some level of internal locus of control to this to maybe be more... Maybe that can add something, right? Maybe we can get something out of it.
Well, I think it's really healthy to understand what you can and can't control, because, like, my mom is a very spiritual person, and she's always, like, she's a very, like, external locus of control sort of person, but really there are some things, like, one thing she would always tell me growing up, because I'm very much the opposite, like my dad, and we get very neurotic and worried about a lot of stuff, and she would just say, like, you can't do anything about it. You just need to, like,
chill
give
out.
it up and, like, leave it up to your faith or, like, higher powers or whatever. Like, it's and sometimes that is the case. Like, it would annoy the crap out of me when she would say it, but really you do sometimes just need to think, you know what?
I can't do anything.
There's nothing I can do. I need to just surrender to the higher forces of the universe.
Whatever,
be they what they may,
be they the wind or something else, yeah. But yeah, so why don't we get into some of the things that you can and can't control in Commander?
Yeah. So the first thing, I think everyone has had this experience, and everyone is this person at some point in their Magic playing career. And honestly, I feel like, Spencer, like, even you and I might have game, like, I think we're very, like, we like to take responsibility for how things go, but we're not above complaining about some mana screw or mana flood.
Of course, you always can feel like you're getting sacked by the luck of the draw, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody definitely has drawn too many lands or not enough lands, and you have to be understanding that there are some things about that you can control and some things that you can't. Obviously, the part that you can control is your opening hand, and I know that we've talked a lot about how maybe you should mulligan things or not, whatever. It's not really what we're talking about here. But if you end up drawing too many lands or don't draw too many lands, to some extent you can't control that. But also, you should take responsibility where it exists, and it's hard to kind of see where that is. But yeah, I guess the opening hand is where it is, right? I
think we all know somebody who, anytime they lose, it was always either mana flood or mana screw. Like, they're always having one of those problems. And it's kind of like a little bit of it's a little bit counterintuitive, because if you want to think about it like this, like, let's say you drew one too many lands. Like, if you end the game with an extra land in your hand, I mean, isn't that kind of technically mana flood? Like, couldn't you argue that? Like, so it feels like the odds of having exactly the amount of lands or exactly the amount of, like, non-lands in your hand is so astronomically low that it probably 95% of games are going to be not exactly what you want. It's like, what do you want to have happen? Do you want to draw a land, like, every turn up until, like, turn 6, 7, or 8? And then just not draw any lands for the rest. Like, that's not realistic. Not reasonable, yeah, or realistic. I mean, I don't know, Spence. I feel like I almost can't remember the last game where I felt really, like, mana screwed, because I tend to put at least 36 lands in my decks. I honestly tend to favor 38. Yeah, honestly. A lot of your decks, I think, have 38. Yeah, I'll go 38. I think I'll go 40 if it's if I'm playing, like, some real cringo lands, like Temple of the False God. Yeah. I just always love playing more lands, because I think we've had the card versus mana, like, which is more important as a resource, like mana or cards in hand. And I remember talking to my friend Charlie, who's a really smart guy, and he was very much in the mana camp because he would play a Thrasios deck.
Yeah.
So, like, you've always got
Cards.
the cards.
Yeah.
But I think what I extrapolated from that take, and like, because he's a very smart guy, is like, well, I'd always rather be hitting my land drops because I always have this card I can play in my command zone.
Yeah.
Sometimes I got 2 of them. So if worst case scenario, you can always like just keep playing that, and that's gonna scale better with like depending on what your commander is. Like some that's really not gonna help you that much.
But some are, yeah, I get
But
you.
it's something. It's a game action you can take. So whereas like if you're missing lands, really I don't think most decks are built to function off of like 3 lands in play.
You're kind of capped, right, in like
Yeah.
what you can do. I get you. And I suppose you're capped in a similar way in, you know, with by not having cards, but at least it's a little bit different, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had something I was going to say about this, but I can't quite remember. Well, also besides just like mana, like you can also extrapolate this to other types of cards. Like, you'll play a game and somebody will be like, "Okay, I didn't draw enough interaction this game to really deal with the table," but like the amount that you're going to need in a game varies. And also, like, whether you need any in a game will vary, I suppose. So, and when you combine all of the types of cards that you might want to see in a game, like, let's say you want to have 2, by turn 3, you want to have 2 interaction and 1 ramp card and 4 lands and 1 value piece. Like, it's not, like, the odds are not good for you to hit everything when you want it.
I think, on the last episode, I talked about a game where somebody had a really crazy start, and I beast within their Smothering Tithe and then quadruple decimated them.
Yeah.
And they still won. And I could have gotten to the end of that game and been like, man, I didn't draw enough removal. It's like, I did everything I could.
Yeah.
That was more removal than most people would have, I think.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, I did okay. So I have to believe that that was I had control over that. So I did what I could.
One thing that I want to say about this is that I really do think that, and I'm not trying to be holier than thou or smarter than other people here, just take my word for it, hopefully. I think people really do... statistics are unintuitive, okay? So people really do overestimate how unlucky they are being in any situation. They will have something happen that they don't like, and they will assume that it is actually very unlucky for that to happen, where in reality, it might be actually like, oh, yeah, actually there was like a pretty like reasonable 30% chance that this happens versus like their perception of like it's like a 1%.
Right, if you get another land.
But there's really like a 40% chance of you drawing that land.
Right, it's a very good odds that you're going to draw a land in your commander deck. Like that's just how you have to build that and have functionality.
And you can't think, like let's say you're flooding and you draw a land for the turn, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's say that happens. Okay, unlucky, right? And then you're like, draw another land. And then you're like, okay, getting unlucky 2 times in a row isn't very unlucky. But you have to remember that these aren't really conditional on each other. Like, it's just you getting unlucky 2 times. It's not like drawing... It's not like once you have drawn that first land, that the next land is like a quarter as likely to be drawn. It's still like this odds are this. So, people, if you understand what I'm saying, it's not like after you draw the first land, the next land is like a 10%. No, after you draw the first land, the next land's still like a 40%.
Well, I know this isn't going to make complete like foolproof sense, but I was just thinking like what's the on average the amount of lands that somebody wants to have in their opening hand? It's usually like 2 or 3, right?
I would think 3
like
or 4,
at least
but
3,
sure,
right?
Sure, 3. I'll say 3.
So let's say if you want 3 out of your 7 opening cards to be lands,
yeah,
that's something you want to consistently happen because that's a good opening hand. To make that happen, you've got to play that like we were saying, like around like 36-ish lands if you want that to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for that level of if you want that to like happen like most of the time, maybe even like 36 is a little bit low
for that.
Like,
yeah.
So really, you're getting off like really like easy on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. And if you extrapolate that to other kinds of cards, what if you got to play 36 card draw cards to have 3 in your opening hand consistently? But no, I wouldn't recommend that. Well, why don't we
That's
move,
the Josh Lee Kwai approach.
Yeah, of course. remember Josh Knights?
Yeah, they're not 3 card draw spells. Ship it. Trash. Mulligan.
Okay, well, what's another thing in Commander that is or isn't controllable?
So, This is one that I've got a buddy that makes a really, really big deal about, and we covered this in a recent episode. But that would be the turn order of the game. It's a random die roll or
however
rock paper scissors tournament or
sure. Maybe a
duel with pistols.
It's not random, so that's an inappropriate way to determine the
Yeah, we should do that though.
Yeah, we should try that sometime.
Because then I would win.
We could do we could play chicken with giving ourselves paper cuts, see who lasts longer. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to make everyone envision that. But no, turn order is certainly something that you cannot control. But maybe it's maybe that's not a bad thing, right? Maybe that variance is good.
Yeah, I think we laid out some reasons why maybe it's not always the best thing to go for. Obviously, we're not talking about CDH.
Yep.
I don't think there's a great argument for going not first in CDH. Oh, you get your gemstone caverns.
Yeah.
But aside from that, yeah, it's a lot of people I think get pretty hung up on that, like their turn order. Like I think if somebody's going last in a commander game, I think a lot of people might have a sort of defeatist attitude about that.
Yeah.
And just think, wow, the odds are stacked against me.
But the thing is, with going with the point I want to kind of hit home here is that you cannot control at all where you go, what position you go in the table. So there's not really much use of like stressing over it. Like sure, you can change the way you play based on your turn order, but you shouldn't really make the mentality of like, oh man, I'm so unlucky. Like I really beat yourself up over the fact that something random happened to you in that sense. There wasn't anything you could do.
Well, I think people, we kind of have the a bias towards seeing the world like mostly through our own point of view.
Yeah.
And so I think people don't really pay attention to when everyone else around you is having worse luck than you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because people, that's the thing about it. People get so hung up on luck, and that's a really big concept in like the locus of control. Is like, am I lucky, or is this person luckier than I am?
Yeah. Oh, and another thing with the locus control is that when good things happen to you, it's you think and you're like, it's I caused these good things to happen to me. When good things happen to other people, it's because the world caused them to have good things happen to them.
It's called the self-serving bias.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing, and there's along the lines. There's another thing. The opposite, like the inverse of that, is called the fundamental attribution error, where when somebody else does something, you kind of tend to think that they did it for internal reasons. Like if somebody cuts you off in traffic, like, oh, it's because they're an asshole. But if it was me, it was like, no, I'm late for work. It's an external thing.
Yeah.
So you don't.
I was forced to. My wife's in labor.
Yeah, you don't give other people the benefit of the doubt for why they do things or why things happen to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, people are just you need to see things from another perspective.
Yeah, try to slow down and think: am I falling into this sort of pitfall?
And everybody does it. Like I want to make that clear. Like all the stuff we're talking about. Like we're not saying that we don't do this stuff.
Another thing that is a little bit interesting about control, and this one goes kind of both ways, is that the actions of your opponents versus your own actions, right? Like it's a bit of a tricky subject because you'd like to think that you have some influence over actions that your opponents take, but sometimes opponents will do things for reasons that you can't possibly foresee, mm-hmm. or maybe they're just like a wild card kind of person, right? Like, and you just can't really like they defy logic or something, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you could know that and influence it or whatever. It's going down levels that are like maybe self-destructive to try to do that, to try to follow all that.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone's played a game with strangers or randos at the game shop, and you sit down and there's just somebody who is the sort of person they draw a removal spell or some kind of interaction and they play it on the first thing they can.
Yeah.
Just to play the game. Like that's fun for some people, and it's not really like much threat assessment or anything really put into it. It's just like, I have a card, I want to play the card. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything like, it's not malicious, but it can definitely be very it can be annoying, and
Yeah.
you definitely, if you're in that situation, you feel like you don't have a lot of control over that.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I don't think you can control that. Like, maybe you can say something, but like, what's the good response to that? To be like, hey, maybe like you shouldn't do that. That's really stupid. You're kind of the asshole.
I think that's what I think the interesting thing about that is you probably could have some level of control over that, but it probably wouldn't be worth it because you'd be doing something that would most likely be rude or kind of infringing on someone else's agency.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think that's worth it for me most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it can be very frustrating to think that you don't have control, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you should try to take that external locus of control model and be like, you know what? It's just the way it is, right? Like, bad things going to happen sometimes.
I think people doing that sort of thing, you kind of have to let that game be its own lesson instead of like laying it out for that person, being like, hey, we lost the game because you do that. You kind of have to let them see that themselves, and let them learn from their own mistakes.
You have to tell them to listen to the EDHTake episode on politics and the locus of control.
I think one of my favorite like iffy threat assessment stories is there was this guy we used to play with who was kind of like a new Magic player at the shop. And I was playing a game with him and a couple of people playing like slightly like higher power decks, and I was playing like my Tajik Hate Bears deck, and I had a pretty good early start, and I got somebody down really low in life, and I kind of made the agreement with them to like not kill them because we needed their help to like take somebody else out.
Hey, there was an audio issue, so I'm just going to explain real quick. Eli plays an Urabrask on an empty board, and then the blue player counters it, and then next turn, the next player plays a Rise of the Dark Realms, and reanimates everything.
But I like draw my top deck, and I play an Urabrask.
Yeah.
And the guy across from me, the newer player, he does the blue player thing. He goes, heh heh, no. Back to this guy's turn. Somebody plays a Rise of the Dark Realms. And now all the creatures have haste.
Because he killed the Urabrask.
So, yeah. I'd like to think that he understood what happened there.
You know, actually, I've had this happen a couple times in my life, and it's that somebody does one of those things where it's like a mistake, or maybe they use a removal spell wrong or something like that, or, you know, quote unquote wrong, and they might. This doesn't happen a lot, but if somebody like after a game says something like, "Oh man, I guess I really should have. I think I had my target set wrong. I need to," or like, "Oh, I really made a mistake with that," or something. That can actually feel really good to hear, because it feels like you probably had a little bit of rage bubbling up, and for them to say something like that, that can kind of just like all of it gone. Like, it's like, oh my god, yeah. You are so right. Thank you. You're learning.
On the opposite side of that, I don't think you should ever get to the end of the game and be like, hey man, you should have really done this, because that could feel really bad. Because like, you can't know what, like, even in my example, who am I to say that like that he didn't think that Urabrask was the worst thing in the world? Like, I guess,
do I know his deck better than he does? Right?
The thought process, like, I was thinking like, well, I'm the person right after you. Like, you've got 2 more turns with 2 players who have way more mana than I do. Maybe it would be the better thing to counter the last thing played before your turn if you're in that position.
Yeah.
But like we talked about that in the turn order episode, how like when you're the person in the middle is kind of safe, because you don't want to be right after the person with the counter spell, and you don't want to be the person right before them. But yeah, I don't know. So I couldn't say, like, he couldn't have known that the other guy had to Rise of the Dark Realms, obviously.
You wouldn't tell him that he was wrong, but if he volunteered that information yourself, you know, that probably would have felt pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. You'd been like, oh yeah, wow, that's really humble of you as well, because most people don't want to admit if they, like, it's one thing. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying if they made a mistake and they think afterwards, they reflect and say, I made a mistake, if they admit that feels good for me. I feel like, wow, that says a lot about you, and it makes me feel better.
Right, and I'm happy for them, because that was probably a learning experience, whereas if somebody's just like, or like if that situation happened, and he was just like, oh, well, I guess there's nothing I could have done there.
Yeah.
I did everything I could have, and it's like, well...
And you'd probably feel better, even more so than being happy for yourself, you'd probably feel better about what happened to you if they know it was a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Like, if someone goes and, scratches your car or something on accident, right? If they just think it was your fault for, like, parking somewhere, or if they think it was their fault because they, like, really fucked something up, it, like, does make a difference in how you feel about it.
Right.
Like, if someone's really apologetic and like, oh, shit, I made a big mistake, like, it makes a big difference.
I guess that kind of ties into I think the last main thing we wanted to talk about as far as things you can control in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your freaking attitude.
True.
Because some people really have a bad attitude when you're playing cards with them, and just nothing's going right, everything is wrong, nobody can do anything right, nothing can make them happy.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone has bad days. I've definitely been that person before in a game.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever really, like, super lashed out at anyone. I think I had, like, a period where I was maybe a little bit, like, kind of sensitive to stuff, and, like, people would... You ever play in, like, a game and things aren't going well for you, or, like, you get kind of owned somehow, and somebody, like... Or you make a mistake and somebody, like, points it out and, like, kind of laughs about it. And I think that the most, like, mad I ever got to somebody was, like, they did something like that, and I was just like, man, like, you make so many mistakes. Like, you have, like... you're throwing stones in a glass house, buddy.
Oh, damn.
Like, I think...
Just getting a little snappy.
That's probably, like, the most snappy I ever got back at somebody, but that was a bad attitude, and I felt bad about it.
Mm-hmm. No, I get you. Like, definitely... So the question here, Eli, is to what extent are we able to control our feelings, right? Because... are we able to control them? Are we not? What do you think?
So I think that your initial, like, gut reaction, the feeling in the moment, you can't control how you respond to a situation, but you do have control after that fact of how you process those feelings and how you choose to respond to them.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Like in that situation, if somebody, like, making me feel insecure or, like, laughing at me, like, I'm going to feel pissed about it. But then I can have the response of either being like, well... they probably didn't mean anything that bad by it, or I can respond, no, they were trying to piss me off, and I'm going to get them back. I'm going to try and hurt them back.
Yeah, and this isn't even just to say your response to them. I'm talking about, like, you and I are talking about, like, the level before the response. Like, like, the level before, like, the vocal response is, like, how you yourself, like, compartmentalize it. Like, how you rationalize your feelings, right? Because I think, like you were saying, like, you can't control your feeling, but you can control how your feelings make you feel to some extent. You can rationalize them a little bit.
Yeah.
You can push your feelings in a positive direction, hopefully. That's what I'd like to think.
And hopefully you understand yourself well enough to know why you're feeling that way. Because I think, personally, like, my mom would always say this acronym, she would say HALT, which stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Oh, go to explain those check marks.
If you're really pissy, like, you're probably one of those things.
The funny thing, I think, with that, Eli, is I think a lot of the times you might be one of those things, but you don't even know that you're one of those things. Like, sometimes you're hungry, but you don't even know you're hungry. Or, like you said, tired, but, like, you're good. You're energized. It's kind of contradictory with itself, but I think that is the case. Like, you don't feel hungry, but you go and you eat, like, a bowl of cereal or something, and all of a sudden you feel, like, so much better.
Well, I think us and a lot of people can relate with the just, like, forgetting to eat thing. Or, like, especially if we're going to play cards or something, like, the time it starts is around 5, so, like, if I
skip dinner,
ate, like, a late lunch or something, then I'll go there and, like, not really have time to, like, get a proper dinner, and I'll bring, like, granola bars or, like, get a snack or something. But it's not great, and especially when you're dealing with a lot of big personalities, it can be a little bit mentally exhausting, I think, so that kind of tires me out sometimes. Like, I try to match people's energy when I can, but I've had to teach myself just to not do that.
Well, especially you were saying, Eli, like, for, there's that whole, like, introverted versus extroverted kind of, like, dynamic where, like, some people, like myself, you kind of can't handle hours and hours and hours of constant social situations or something like that. Like you need to cool down yourself kind of thing. And like you were saying, if you're dealing with a lot of big personalities, you might get tired or exhausted or something, right? It's definitely possible.
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot of people that I consider myself pretty good friends with, but they just have very, very big personalities and they're very high energy, and it is a little bit harder for me to interact with them for prolonged periods of time.
Yeah. And there's nothing against them, it's just the way that things are.
Right, exactly. Some people you just... they're perfectly nice people, and they're good people. I wouldn't say anything. Like, we talk a lot of shit on Magic players, but I wouldn't say that they're bad people. It's just some people are kind of like oil and water. You just don't mix no matter how hard you try.
Yeah. True. Yeah. So, is there anything else that you want to talk about this kind of all these things we can or can't control before we move on?
Well, I think just the most important thing for understanding your feeling of control, like the locus, like where it lies, is a sense of you need to have the ability to use introspection and think about what it is you're doing or like how things are affecting you, and just like take a step back and look at things from the outside. And I think that's why it helps to have, like I was saying earlier, friends that will check you on stuff like that, or like say things like kind of challenge your worldview sometimes.
Yeah, I do really actually appreciate that that idea of challenging conversations or challenging someone's worldview. I think you'd like to think that I think the intent of stuff like college is kind of like to get you outside of your bubble a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it maybe fails at that sometimes. But I think it's good to surround yourself with people that will respectfully get you to question, or be introspective, right? They get you to be introspective is really the point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I consider myself a very intelligent person, but I think the wisest thing that I try to do is engage with people that I feel like I can learn something from and that can teach me things. And I try and I like there's the expression, nobody knows everything, but everybody knows something. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just best to try and know the most somethings.
The most somethings. There you go.
Yeah, that's what I like to say.
But yeah, so it's not necessarily bad to have an internal or an external locus of control. But, if you believe that your actions are mostly influenced by, like, luck or something like that, shouldn't the same be true for other people around you? So, like we were saying, Eli, the fundamental attribution error, right? Like, you shouldn't think, if you think that everything that happens to you is luck, you should also think the same is true for other people. You shouldn't.
Well, luck's a weird thing, because some people really, I think, do see it like a personality trait. Like, oh, that person's just born lucky. Like,
oh, you mean it's like an RPG where they have a high luck stat?
Yeah, like there's so many things to analyze about like how lucky somebody is. Like, sure, I've pulled 2 mana crypts out of the mystery boosters, and I consider myself a lucky person. But you could make an argument that like. It's hard for me to make this argument because I don't agree with it, but like I could say, well, I wasn't lucky because I wasn't born into like a rich family or something, or like
and that's I was like
lower class
for it or something.
I consider myself like I grew up like pretty like lower class, like lower middle class, like slightly poor, but I consider myself very blessed and very lucky in the situations that I was. I think I had great parents and everything, and we never really wanted for much growing up, so. Mm-hmm. I consider myself lucky, but I mean, you could, if somebody's going to make that argument of like, you're lucky because of X, because you have good things happen to you within the game of Magic. That's bullshit. That's shitty. That's terrible luck.
Yeah.
Like, I would trade that in for any other kind of luck.
Yeah. Can I get lucky on getting a scholarship? Can I get lucky on my choice of career? And
like, yeah, man, can I get lucky in life or like in my relationships with people? Can I be lucky with women or like, like, something that's useful?
Hey man, I'll take the magic luck.
Some people take what they can get. Some people need to have something because, like we were saying earlier, it's about like self-image. Everyone needs to believe something about themselves or about the world as a whole to believe it's a good or it's a certain kind of place. It needs to be consistent. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, I just luck. I don't believe it. I don't believe in it. I think there are certain people who are definitely have privileges, but luck,
natural extension of the consequences of actions, right? Like butterfly that flaps its wings and causes a tsunami or whatever.
Yeah, it's like either you believe everything is chaos and random, or you believe that everything kind of is like a perpetuated cycle of how the world works, or like how cultures interact and like how communities interact, or like certain. There's just so much. There's so many factors. It's just there's too much to
kind of cognify.
Yeah,
cognify. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean.
It's a word now.
Well, I think it is a word. I just not the right tense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
But yeah, that's.
I think that's all we have to say about the locus of control. It's a very interesting idea, and I'd like to know, like I said, to preface this again, very journeyman psychologist, like not very experienced. Like I've taken maybe 3 classes, and it just interests me, and I did try to look over my notes and everything I had and do some slight research before this, but if we got something wrong, I'd like to be made aware of that, and I apologize for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just it's a simple concept that I think is very interesting, and there's a lot to think about.
There's a lot of room to think about or discuss, I think. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and if I made any harmful assumptions about culture or anything, I tried not to, but I apologize.
Of course. Well, after our delve into the realms of psychology, why don't we talk about some magic cards at the end here? Because today, about 30 minutes before we started our podcast, we got some spoilers
from the Warhammer cards.
From some Warhammer cards. And not just the Warhammer cards, but we also want to talk about the new D&D set.
Well, yeah, Spencer, we got lied to because I was under the impression that it was D&D set spoiler time.
Yeah.
And then they, preempt that with the Warhammer stuff, which I'm much more excited for, but I'm a little more hesitant. If you guys haven't seen yet, there's only one deck with white in it.
Yeah,
I'm malding. God damn it.
That's a shame. But Eli, you know what that is? It's just bad luck. No.
Yeah, you can't control what WotC does.
You can't control what WotC does, no matter how much you may try.
They're a higher power. Honestly, they're probably responsible for every instance of bad luck a Magic player has.
Every bad thing that's happened to me in the context of Commander is WotC's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least to some level, because they made the game. But let's take a moment, Eli, because I know something that I had not realized until you told me today was that the Commander Baldur's Gate set is pretty much like a replacement for Commander Legends 2, right? You said that?
Well, it is a Commander Legends. It's Commander Legends 2 Battle for Baldur's Gate. So it's like the last Commander Legends, except this one is specifically going to be Dungeons and Dragons themed.
Yeah.
So whereas last Commander Legends was a
Dominaria?
great place. Well, I think it was kind of set all throughout the multiverse, but it had a lot of old Magic characters brought back to the modern context, like Jessica, Kamal,
Baron Sangir, yeah.
And the amount of legends in that set really gave them the ability to do that. And of course, Wizards, they can't help themselves. They've got a billion named characters that they could draw from, but they always got to make
new ones.
My girl Gillanra,
yeah,
the Dryad,
Rograk, the new Kobold. I don't know if he was mentioned before, but I don't think so.
Yeah, you got Rograk, Arden.
Yeah,
he might have been in. I don't know. Like I'm saying, they might be mentioned one time in a story or something, but
yeah,
I just feel like there's other characters they could use. But this time, we don't even got to worry about that because this is going to be all Dungeons and Dragons characters.
And so, just to clarify, I like some Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah,
I partake in some D&D every once in a while, but I think I would have preferred a Commander Legends 2 based on old Magic characters like the first one.
Yeah, me too. I'm very old fashioned though, but I guess we are getting the Brothers War set.
That is going to
be at the end of this year, so that should hopefully scratch that itch.
Yeah,
because that's literally a complete throwback.
That's
going to
be base as fuck, and we're gonna get oh my god, I'm gonna get a new. Oh, we're gonna get a new Urza, and it's gonna be broken. Yeah, I want a new Mishra because I love the Mishra original card, and I played a deck with it, and I will definitely build new Mishra if it's interesting.
It's a very cool commander, the original Mishra.
Yeah, but
I actually play a couple of the new dragon. They had that cycle of the mythic dragons in the last D&D set, and I thought they were all really cool.
Those are cool. Icing Death and
Icing Death, Ebon Lich, or the black one that I really wanted to get, but it got a little too expensive.
$20 or something, yeah.
Old Gnawbone.
Yeah, classic.
That makes everyone so mad.
The Desert Doom, the blue one.
Yeah, and the red one is Inferno of the Star Mounds.
That one's so cool.
That one was pretty cool too, but I never picked one up.
Mm-hmm.
But I like dragons.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of the dungeons.
No, not a dungeon guy.
I really don't care for that mechanic.
Mm-hmm. It's very clunky. Oh, I had an experience recently where I was playing at the card store with a fairly new player, and he had presumably built his own deck. It was the 2-mana Dimir commander that like when it hits you, you like scry 1 and mill 1.
Yeah, I think that guy was actually from the D&D set.
Yeah, and he had played a little blue creature that I think it says when it hits an opponent, you venture into the dungeon. I think it's like a 3-drop or something. And he was like, what does venture into the dungeon mean? And I just thought to myself, man, I'm really about to try to explain venture in the dungeon to a new player without even having the dungeons right now. So I pulled them up on my phone and I was like, this is kind of what it does. Don't worry about them. You're not gonna you can do it once probably in this game and it's gonna scry 1.
So
it's complicated.
I can see the argument. There's already a lot of game pieces that most Magic players are expected to have for a normal game of Magic. Those being, you need dice for your life total, some way to track your life total. You need stuff to represent counters, so you could use little
tokens,
little beads, or like dice or something.
You need a treasure token, guys.
Yeah, you need, or like you said, tokens. So it's not too much to assume that you might want to have the dungeon cards. But that's another game piece you need. And then now another game piece you definitely need, and this is something a lot of Magic players do have, but technically not the right version of it, is a D20. And man, I really do not like the roll a D20 mechanic.
Yeah, not a fan personally. I mean, it's kind of flavorful, and that's cool, right? But I don't, yeah.
Well, and like we were saying earlier, like, I'm a lucky person. I should love that mechanic. I'm good at rolling dice.
Yeah.
It's totally within my skill.
So it's not like these mechanics are garbage terrible. Like they're definitely going to make probably a cool dungeon card that I like, or they're going to make a cool D20 card that, like, I know Eli, I think you might have, I don't know if you've played it, but there's like a 4-drop red creature, like when it attacks, you like roll a D20 and then you get to like copy an attacking creature. And if you like roll a high number, you get to like copy it twice or something, or it sticks around or whatever. That's a cool card.
Yeah, they have some cool cards, and even the I don't hate the dungeon mechanic that much. I think there's some cool stuff with it.
But the point that I'm trying to make here, Eli, is that like I would rather if these cool cards were built around another, old forgotten mechanic. I didn't say forgotten. Like for example, in these new decks that just came out in New Capenna. The commander decks, they started putting, I think they put like addendum or like something like that, or addendum.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did like addendum card. They had like some other like old mechanics.
They brought some weird, like they had one escape card.
I love that. That. So I would prefer those kinds of things over some of the mechanics expressed in the D&D sets. Maybe they'll have some cool new mechanics though. So I don't want to speak too soon because maybe they'll make it base as fuck.
Yeah, we don't want to be spoil sports, but I'm sure a lot of people are excited because a lot of people really did like Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. But yeah, I just I would have preferred a Magic themed Commander Legends. I mean, we'll hold out judgment, but I'm not great on it. So we got a new Planeswalker Commander in the Minsk guy.
Yeah,
he makes a hamster.
Wow, lol. Aren't they cute? I would have been happy if it made a capybara. Then I would have been happy.
Here's what Magic players be doing, Spencer. They be like hamster and then just stare at you until you laugh or like
squirrel
or you respond in like a positive way.
Yeah,
you just gotta be like, yeah.
People be like, people really do be like, they play like an Ishimaru deck and they'd be like, "You're gonna kill my dog? Oh, don't kill my dog." They really do be like that.
That just makes me want to do it more.
So honestly. I had a thought, Eli, and maybe this is just my inner I don't know, just being an asshole. But I was like, oh my god, remember that new commander that says whenever you make a token, instead you could make a cat with haste or a dog with vigilance.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking, how epic would it be if my win condition, I would build that deck with the win condition being like some sort of aristocrats thing where the goal was to burn all of the cats and dogs to kill everybody. And I was like, that's probably not a very, very... I'm probably not going to do that, but I had a thought, and I was like, oh yeah, wouldn't that be epic?
Animal cruelty.deck.
Yeah, as the win condition. The famous Beatles song, "It's Okay to Leave a Dog in a Hot Car."
Oh yeah, John Lennon was not a lot of people know that about him.
Yeah, Google that if you're curious. It's an interesting factoid.
Yeah. Spencer, who's your favorite Beatle?
Hold on a sec. Wait. The one that wasn't a bad person.
Oh shit, he knows the game.
I know the gag. John Lennon is my favorite Beatle. No, what was I gonna say? Okay, so besides the Commander Legends stuff, right, or the Baldur's Gate, whatever, Warhammer. Eli, I think Warhammer's pretty cool. I think you like Warhammer. I like Warhammer.
Yeah, I love Warhammer. I mean, I'm very, skeptical about the outside IPs in Magic, especially the non-fantasy stuff, but Warhammer's a rare franchise that they could have picked, that they could do something like sci-fi in Magic.
And make you happy.
And I would be kind of okay with it. I mean, we'll have to wait and see how they handle it, because, I'm not a huge Warhammer person, but man, the lore of Warhammer is just, it's so cool. I'd recommend, if anyone doesn't know a lot about Warhammer, there's a lot of channels that do lore videos on it.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's really neat.
Just to quickly do a thing, I think that the Abaddon, the spoiler they spoiled, have not put a lot of thought into it, but it seems kind of gross. Not a big fan of that card. It seems pretty strong.
Yeah.
And not like a kind of gameplay that I like, I think.
Do you ever see, like, Cascade brought into a set and think, like, this is going to do fun things?
Yeah, you have to be very specific to it. Like, you have to give the card Cascade.
Right, that can be fine. It's like when something says, like, give busted mechanic to other cards.
To all other cards?
So you can give busted mechanics to cards that are already busted. I don't think that ever works out for it. Like Idris is a very strong commander, if anyone's ever played against. Like, it's almost like a kill-ons, like, you can't let it connect.
I don't think that's good when they make commanders that are like kill-ons. Like, if you didn't know, this card is a 5-mana 5/5. It says, with trample, it says, during your turn, spells you cast from your hand with mana value X or less have Cascade, where X is the total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. It's not hard to deal 5 damage to your opponents to give all your cards CMC 5 or less Cascade.
Yeah.
And that's not... Man, it's not... I don't like it, personally. That being said, this other card that was spoiled, we're not going to mention all the cards, there's 4, but I really do like Blood for the Blood God, both in theming, because it's a really iconic thing from the lore, it's like kind of a meme, but also it's a really cool card. It's a 8 black, red for an instant. It says it costs 1 less for each creature that died this turn, so at lowest it could be black, red, 3 mana. And it says, discard your hand, then draw 8 cards, and then it deals 8 damage to each opponent, and then it exiles itself. I think this is just it doesn't seem super broken to me either. I think it just seems really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It scratches an itch for me in like 3 different ways. So I like it. Do you have anything to say about these cards, Eli?
Just, I get a little bit worried every time there's new Commander precons coming out.
You know what? I think I'm just in I have accepted that every time they make a new set with Commander cards, there will be something that's too good, and it will happen. And we just have to, Eli, that we don't have any control over that. We can't control the fact that Wizards is going to make broken cards.
We can control ourselves in not playing those cards.
Giga Chad.
And that's all you can hope for, and hope that other people have a
similar...
that's really... I think that's the best thing you can control in Commander and Magic, is creating your ideal group of people to play with.
Mm-hmm.
Because those can really help...
Commander is really like a deck build, like a deck building game. Like games where you build a deck during a game kind of thing.
Oh yeah, except you're trying to build like your perfect
people to
group.
play with.
Yeah, because you need to have a good group dynamic and have everyone on the same page about things. And then I think that really I think a lot of the external locus of control stuff is mostly the result of bad feelings and salt and trying to deal with that.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you can cut down on that just naturally by like playing with people you have fun with,
you might not even have to think about all these things.
Yeah, I think you just you don't get caught up in your head so much. You don't overthink a bunch of things because you're not having a consistently like bad time all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that's the main advice is just try and have a good time.
Yeah. Try to look out for yourself and other people.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all we have to say today, guys. Sorry for the late uploads. We're gonna try and catch back up, and I think we've had some pretty good episodes lately. This one and the last one, I'm pretty happy with these. Sorry I was kind of caught earlier in the episode trying to think of a word. It'll happen sometimes.
Yeah.
I can't control it.
Can't control it. All right, well, thank you for listening, guys.
But yeah, follow us on Twitter.
Yeah.
And give us a subscribe. us a comment. If you if we
Enjoyed.
were wrong about something, like, please let me know. I like to be educated. I don't like to spread misinformation if we can help it.
And if we were right, tell me so to feed my self-image of myself.
Yes. But yeah, I've been Elijah Samuelson.
And I've been Spencer Cook.
See you next time.